Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about methods and methods that return values. Now you've all used methods before, presumably. For example, in the example that you're looking at now on the screen, you have a main method. And you have what's called the identifier, which is previous to the actual name. Like where we see public, static, void. Those are called identifiers and modifiers. Basically public meaning that it's a public method, that it could be called from either this program or other programs. Static meaning that it's only in one instance of this program. Static works a little bit more obscure, so we're going to save that for a topic for another day. But void is the one we're going to focus on today, where void just means that this method returns nothing. Now, what does that really mean? Now, you've used methods before. Remember, what we do is we use methods when we want to organize code. So if we have like a chunk of code that has to do with adding numbers, you build a method called add numbers. If you have a method that determines what department you work for, you might declare and use a method called add department. So you know the concept of methods and how we use methods to organize our code. What you probably haven't done yet is use return values from your methods. And that's what that void means. That void just means on line 3 that the main method doesn't return anything. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that you still understand methods the way that you always have. It's just now what you can do, if you choose, is you could have a method returning a value. Thus, you may be able to, or you may want to use that value in other areas of your program. Think about it. Think about a method that you might have used or written that doesn't return a value. So like, for example, you'd call a method called add numbers or whatever. So you would have all the functionality in that method, and that when that method was done executing, that method just was done executing. It's not a wrong thing. I'm not saying that return values are better than non-returning values. It's just a different concept, and it's taking methods and kind of taking it to not a different level, because you were saying if it's a different level that it's better, but just another way of using them. Let's just say that you wrote a method that you wanted to have the value or something that method does, and you wanted to use that value in other areas of your program. And that's what the return values is. So what we're going to do is we're going to write methods, or one method here, that rather than saying void, meaning that we're going to return nothing, we're going to say int. It's going to return an integer. So let's build this method now, and we'll talk about it as we go. Now, it's going to be a public method and static, and more about static is in a topic of a different video. And we have public static void, and before we actually change this to actually return something, let's just write the method the way that you might be using it. Let's talk about this public static void though. Again, the public just means that this method can be called by this program or any other program. We don't really have in our lifetime right now, or in our experience base, other programs, but public just means it could be called really from anywhere. Most of our methods are going to be public for now. So just to kind of like make it look like the ones that you're used to, on line 5, I'm just going to put in public static void, and what this method is going to do is it's called add numbers, and I put an int num1 and int num2. Then I'm going to put in just a line of code for the result. So I'm just going to put in like another integer on line 6, and then I'm going to add num1 to num2 and put it in this variable here in line 6 called result. So on line 7 I'll say result is equal to, and how about num1 plus num2. Now remember, this is just a demonstration for what we can do with a method to return a value. Don't get too hung up on what we're doing, just that we're going to return something. And then on line 8, I'll just do like a system.out print line, and I'll just print out what the result is. So while I'm typing this, this is a method that you might be used to using, or this might be familiar to you, where you have a method that does something, and I'm being vague on purpose, but doesn't really return anything. It just adds two numbers and then is kind of done. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing. I'm saying that that's really all it does. So let me just finish line 8 and put system.out line result. Let me spell that correctly. And let me call that method from my main method. So I'll just put in add numbers, and I'll pass in 23 and 45, and then I'll run. It looks like I'm missing a semicolon on line 9, so I'm going to have to add that. But take a look at what I'm doing here. This is something that should be very familiar to you for now, at least at this point. Where in my main method, I'm calling another method called add numbers. I'm passing it two numbers. The method adds the two numbers and prints them out. So I'm going to have to fix my semicolon on line 9 to get this to run. I think I'm going to do that now. And then I'm just going to click on execute. So when I click on execute, it should run okay. So I get result equals 68. Now, correct. Now, nothing unusual has happened here. I'm not trying to set up traps for you for looking at something that's going wrong in this. This is something that's working just fine. And if I wanted to have a method to add two numbers and do nothing else with them, this is perfectly acceptable to do this. But there are instances where you may want to get that value that this method is doing and use it elsewhere in the program. So in that case, we have to change line 6 void to int. What int does is int just says we're going to return an integer. Now, look at this statement or this error message. I went to execute. It says missing return statement. That's because on line 6, I am saying that this method is returning an int. It's not returning void. Void is nothing. So I need to put in a return statement here. So I'll put in a return result. So what this is saying now is line 6 is saying I have add numbers, all that other stuff, but it's returning an integer. So so in that case, what I have to do is on line 10, I have to put in a return statement. Otherwise, I get that error message. So let me just kind of straighten out these brackets, these braces a little bit. It's kind of driving me crazy. They really should line up. I'm kind of a stickler for that. And click on execute. So when you click on execute now, nothing different's going to happen. That error message went away because now line 10 is returning. It's, we're saying we're returning an integer, and now we are. So it runs fine. But what we need to do now is we need to, we don't need to, but we should, since we're returning an integer from add numbers, is we should do something with it. So let's just get rid of line 9 and say, you know what, rather than just displaying what the value is, how about we execute the function add numbers, or the method. They're both the same for now. Methods and functions are really interchangeable at this point, at least as far as the terminology goes. So let me put in for line 4 int, and I'll put in add numbers result or whatever. You guys know how to declare variables by now. And I will say on line 5, how about add numbers result? Now check this out. This is important. Look what I'm doing in line 5. I'm saying fire this function off, this method, add numbers. But what I'm doing now is I'm capturing that return value. So what happens is and when line 11 gets executed, it's going to return that value to line 5. And then in line 5, I can access that value in the variable add numbers result. A little bit about scope here. Notice that we have two integers on line 4 and line 9. Those are independent of each other. That's called variable scope, when you have variables that are independent from each other in two different methods. So that's why we have two. We could use result, and result is only in scope and add numbers. And then we have on line 4, add numbers result, which is only in scope in the main method. That's why they are, a little bit more on that, subject for a different day. So anyway, so on line 6, I'm just saying result equals result, and that's going to be wrong. I'm going to click on execute just to show you. We talked about scope of variables. Line 6 doesn't know what result is because result isn't a variable that's declared in that method. So we're going to have to fix this. So on line 6, we're just going to have to say system.outprint line, and then add numbers result. And that looks better. So let me, didn't mean to click on that. Let me click execute. Almost done. Still got a problem with line 6. I need to have the equals inside of the quotes, correct? And then we'll just change that equal and concatenate the add numbers result. This looks good. So let's execute, and we get result equals 68. Now, you might be saying to yourself, you might ask yourself, how did I get here? So the first half of this program, we just had add numbers, add those two numbers, and print the result out. This is not doing much different than that. So you might be looking for some hidden meaning, and there really isn't one. But the difference is this program now is adding two numbers and returning that result on line 11, or returning that value back to line 5. So now in the main method, I can access whatever that function add numbers did. So add numbers gave me an integer called result on line 11. On line 5, I'm taking that return value. It's getting put into the local variable called add numbers result, and I could use add numbers result now in my main method. So this is what return values do. And again, I'm not saying that return values are better than not using them. It's just a different way that you could use methods when you want that value or whatever that method to persist and read that into a local variable. That's all I have for now. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.